Welcome back to the channel, my spooky friends. Tonight, we delve back into the abyss of fear, into the echoing darkness where shadows dance and whispers taunt the soul. We've got 3 terrifying tales for you, stories whispered in hushed tones, passed from one trembling soul to another. These are the stories that haunt the lonely hours, the ones that make you question the very nature of reality. Stories of deserted garages, cold concrete tombs where silence reigns supreme. But sometimes, silence is shattered, broken by sounds that defy explanation. Turn down the lights, turn up the volume, and prepare to be terrified. These are 3 unexplained noises in deserted garages. The old garage stood bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the streetlights, shadows stretching long and gnarled across the oil-stained floor. Michael, a mechanic with grease under his fingernails and a lifetime of experience with engines, was used to the late nights. But tonight felt different. A chill snaked down his spine as he reached for the light switch, plunging the garage into an almost unnatural darkness. It was a silence so profound it felt heavy, oppressive. He could hear the blood pounding in his ears, a rhythmic thump that only amplified the unsettling quiet. He was about to lock up when he heard it, a soft metallic scraping sound, like something being dragged across the concrete floor. It came from the far end of the garage, from the back corner where they kept the old unusable cars, shrouded under dusty tarps. Michael froze, his hand hovering over the lock. He listened intently, his heart pounding against his ribs. There it was again. The scraping sound, slow and deliberate, sending shivers down his spine. He told himself it was just rats or maybe a stray cat that had gotten in. But deep down, a primal fear began to stir within him. He cautiously made his way towards the sound, each step echoing in the cavernous space. The air grew colder as he neared the back corner. The musty smell of old oil and dust filled his nostrils, making him cough. He could feel his pulse quickening, his hand trembling as he reached for the tarp covering the nearest car. He yanked the tarp away, expecting to find nothing more than an old, rusted chassis. But the scraping sound continued, seemingly coming from behind the wall now. A steady, rhythmic rasp against the concrete. He ran his hand over the cold, damp concrete blocks, his heart hammering in his chest. He could feel a slight vibration, a subtle tremor that seemed to resonate through the wall itself. He pressed his ear against the cold concrete, his breath catching in his throat. The scraping was louder now, accompanied by a low, guttural growling that sent a surge of pure terror through him. He stumbled back, his blood turning to ice. Whatever was behind that wall was something he didn't ever want to face. He fumbled for his keys, his hand shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the lock. He threw the door open and ran out into the night, the sound of his own ragged breathing echoing in his ears. He didn't stop running until he reached the safety of the streetlights, his chest heaving, his body slick with cold sweat. He never went back to the garage alone at night. The memory of that night forever seared into his mind. The scraping, the growling, the feeling of something sinister lurking just beyond the wall, it haunted his dreams. A chilling reminder that some sounds are best left unexplained. The old abandoned garage loomed before them, a skeletal silhouette against the dying light of the setting sun. It was the kind of place that whispered tales of forgotten memories and held a strange allure for adventurous teenagers. "This is going to be epic, Jake," the de facto leader of the group announced, his voice a mix of excitement and nervous bravado. He pushed open the creaking door, its rusted hinges groaning in protest. The rest of the group followed, their laughter echoing in the cavernous space. There was Emily, the skeptic, her arms crossed, a doubtful look on her face. Next came Ben, the timid one, clutching his camera like a lifeline. And finally there was Chloe, always up for a thrill, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. The air inside was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Broken windows allowed slivers of moonlight to pierce the darkness, casting long, eerie shadows that danced across the oil-stained floor. They ventured deeper into the garage, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The only sounds were the distant barking of dogs and the rustling of leaves outside. "This place is creepy," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of her own heart. Relax, Em, Jake said, his voice a little too loud in the stillness. It's just an old garage. They continued their exploration, their flashlights cutting through the gloom, illuminating forgotten tools and discarded car parts. Ben had his camera out, snapping pictures, trying to capture the eerie beauty of the decaying structure. It was Chloe who noticed it first. A faint humming sound coming from the far end of the garage. It was a low, steady hum, like a refrigerator running, but deeper, more mechanical. "What is that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. They all stopped, listening intently. The humming was growing louder, pulsating through the air, vibrating in their chests. It seemed to be coming from behind a large metal door, padlocked shut. Curiosity warred with fear as they approached the door. Ben, his face pale, lowered his camera. Even Jake seemed hesitant now, his earlier bravado replaced by a growing unease. "Maybe we should just go," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. But Chloe was already shaking the padlock, her curiosity getting the better of her. The humming grew louder, and now they could hear a faint scratching sound coming from behind the door, as if something were trying to get out. Suddenly the padlock burst open, the metal snapping like a twig. The door swung inward with a deafening clang, revealing a darkness so profound it seemed to swallow the light from their flashlights. A collective gasp escaped their lips. The humming was deafening now, and the scratching had intensified, accompanied by a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down their spines. Terror lent them speed they didn't know they possessed. They turned and ran, their flashlights bouncing wildly, casting grotesque shadows that danced around them. They didn't stop running until they were safely outside, the dilapidated garage shrinking behind them in the moonlight. They huddled together, gasping for breath, their hearts pounding in their chests. They never spoke of that night again, but the memory of the humming, the scratching, and the growl lingered, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks in forgotten places. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile, cold light on the empty cars that lined the deserted parking garage. Thomas, a burly man with a salt and pepper beard and weary eyes, sat in his security booth, the monotony of his night shift broken only by the occasional passing car. He'd been a security guard for years, and he had seen his fair share of strange occurrences, but tonight felt different. Something in the stillness made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He took a sip of his lukewarm coffee, the bitter liquid doing little to ease the growing unease in his stomach. The silence was broken only by the low hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of traffic from the street above. It started subtly, a faint tapping sound like someone gently rapping their knuckles against one of the concrete pillars. He dismissed it at first, attributing it to his imagination or perhaps the settling of the old building. But the tapping persisted, growing louder, more insistent. He swiveled in his chair, his eyes scanning the shadowy recesses of the garage. The fluorescent lights cast long, distorted shadows that danced and swayed, playing tricks on his already frayed nerves. He reached for his flashlight, his hand trembling slightly. He had never been one to believe in ghosts, but the rhythmic tapping was unnerving. He slowly got out of his chair, his boots echoing loudly on the concrete floor. He shone his flashlight into the darkness, revealing nothing but empty parking spaces and dust-covered cars. The tapping stopped as abruptly as it had begun. He stood there for a moment, listening intently, his heart pounding in his chest. The silence was almost deafening now, broken only by the sound of his own breathing. He was about to dismiss it as his imagination when he heard it again. This time it was a dragging sound, slow and deliberate, like something heavy being pulled across the concrete floor. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He shone his flashlight in the direction of the sound, his hand trembling so badly that the beam danced wildly across the walls. He could see nothing in the darkness, but the dragging sound continued, closer now, accompanied by a soft guttural growl that sent a surge of pure terror through him. He stumbled back, his heart racing, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was hearing. He had never believed in monsters, but something evil sounded like it was lurking in the shadows of the parking garage. He fumbled for his radio, his fingers clumsy with fear. He managed to stammer out a message to the main office, his voice trembling, his words tumbling over each other in his haste. He didn't wait for a response. He ran towards the exit, his boots pounding on the concrete, the echoes of his own fear chasing him through the darkness. He burst out into the night, gasping for breath, his chest heaving, his body slick with cold sweat. He never went back to that parking garage, the memory of that night forever seared into his mind. The tapping, the dragging, the growling, it haunted his dreams, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most mundane of places. He had faced his fears that night and emerged shaken but alive, forever changed by the encounter. So there you have it, my friends. 3 chilling tales of the unexplained, of the darkness that lurks in the shadows, waiting to make itself known. Remember these stories the next time you find yourself in a deserted garage, listening to the silence. If you enjoyed tonight's journey into the abyss, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying tales. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss a descent into darkness. Until next time, keep the lights on, stay safe, and for God's sake, try to get some sleep.